All right, so I talk to a lot of college students who say they want to start a business or want to start a startup, which aren't the same thing, by the way, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And I always ask, why haven't you yet? Like, okay, you want to start a business. Usually they say one day, or they say right now, but in most cases they haven't done it. So I always ask why, and they pretty much always give the same answers, like, I don't have enough time, I don't have any money, I don't know enough. But the biggest one that I always hear, and that you've probably heard too, and maybe this is your reason for why you haven't started a business yet, is that you don't have an idea. You don't have an idea that you're confident in, or maybe you do have an idea, but you're not sure if it's good or not. So that's what I want to talk about today, is what I've seen work for people in terms of getting that idea. Because when I talk to entrepreneurs, they always say that getting the idea was the easy part. And they always say that if their current company didn't work out, they would start something else, and they're never concerned about the idea getting part of that process. And so there's a reason for that. But first of all, so who am I? I'm Nathan Bucci. I run Catalyst XL. We help university students get started in entrepreneurship, usually by starting or joining a new business / startup. And so the first thing that we teach is actually this concept of startup ideas. And we go through a 4-step kind of framework to help people think through it. And so first I want to talk about what I'm not going to say, because what I hear everybody say and what I don't think typically works is this whole concept of, okay, so hey, you want a business idea, just sit back for a second, think about your day, and think about problems that you experience every day. And now think about a way to solve them. And like, poof, business idea, like you're Jeff Bezos basically. And so there's a reason that I think that doesn't work, and I also have proof that it doesn't work. So here's my proof. My proof is that you've probably heard that before, and you still don't have a business idea. And my other proof is that I heard that a million times and never got a business idea from it. And my other proof is all the other people who you know who have heard that who are not starting businesses. So yeah, wanted to dive into that really quick and why that doesn't really work. But with that being said, I'm going to tell you what I think does work, then I'm going to tell you why I think it works, then I'm going to tell you a couple things that you should know about startup ideas / business ideas, what makes a good one, what separates a startup idea from a business idea. So yeah, okay, so I'll just get right into it. So the 4 steps are this. So the first one is pick an interest that you have. It doesn't have to be like a business related interest at all. It doesn't have to be technology related, just anything that you're interested in. Like if I said, hey, you, so-and-so, what is something that you could talk about for an hour, for 2 hours, 6 hours, an entire day? What is that thing that kind of fires you up? That is step 1, is to think through what that is for you. It doesn't have to be, like I said, technology related, business related. You don't have to have any idea of how a business idea could come from this right now. That's just step 1, is what is the thing that you're most interested in. Step 2 is to find out, in general, what people with that interest want. So if you were in a room with 100 people who had that same interest to you, and you could say, hey, everybody, I can get you XYZ right now. What is XYZ? What is that thing that would make them all go, oh my gosh, we need to talk. We need to talk right now because you have the thing that I want. So that's step 2, find out what people with that interest want. Step 3 is to think about, okay, why doesn't everybody have it yet? So of this group of people with this interest, the people who don't have that thing, why don't they have it? What's in the way of them getting it? And then step 4 is how can you remove that barrier for them? And so one thing I like to say about step 4, and one thing that I think is really important, is that this is the step where a lot of people kind of feel obligated to like have their big grandiose business startup Jeff Bezos idea that's going to change the entire world. They're like, oh, I'm going to remove the barrier with this massive tech platform that I don't understand how to code, or like, you know, we're going to remove it with blockchain, or you know what I mean? Insert startup buzzword here. And so yes, there's a time and place for that. But right now, the useful way to think about this as you're just starting to think through these ideas is, what is the most basic, least scalable way that you could think of to solve that problem, to remove that barrier for that group of people? And the reason that you want to think of it that way is because you could actually do that thing right now. You don't want to set goals that just like are so far out of reach that they're never going to happen. So I talked about the reasons that that students don't always, or that college students typically aren't starting or running their own businesses, right? And so one of those is that the ones who do have ideas usually have ideas that are honestly just so far out of reach that they never get started on because they have no idea where to start. So for this fourth step, I would think through what is the least scalable, simplest way that I can remove this barrier for people. Now I'm going to go back through the 4 steps, and I'm going to give my commentary on why I think each of these work. I mean, the first reason that I think it works is because I've seen it work a bunch of times, but I'm going to go through like kind of the logic behind it. And so starting with the first step. So the first step is pick an interest that you have. So there is a great quote from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator. He says that you don't need to be an expert in startups to start a startup. You just need to be an expert in your customers. And so when you start with an interest that you have when you're trying to arrive at a business idea, you're setting yourself up to serve a customer that you're going to understand because you are that customer. So if I am super interested in skateboarding and my customer, like I'm making something for skateboarders, let's say it's a skateboard even, like something that simple, I'm going to really understand what they want because I have that same interest. I've looked at millions of skateboards. I haven't, I don't skateboard, but I've looked at millions of skateboards. I know what people want, and so I can help solve that problem for them. So hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. Is that's why you want to start with an interest. Another reason is that you'll be more motivated to work on it for a long time if it actually pertains to something that you care about. So that's step 1 and the reason for it. Step 2, find out what people with that interest want. I feel like this is relatively basic, and like I said, you can easily figure this out because you have that interest. And so the thing is that with a lot of businesses, they don't really know what their customers want, and they don't take time to consider whether or not they're making something that people actually want. You can like really quickly get that out of the way if you just start something that pertains to an interest that you have and that pertains to something that you want as an individual because you know people want it because you want it, and a lot of people you know want it because you're in this community of people with this interest, right? Okay, and then the third step is find out what's in the way. I think that's also pretty basic, and again, you can figure it out pretty easily because you are the person. You are like the profile that you're thinking through. And then the fourth, I already gave a whole rant about the fourth and why you should find a very simple way to remove the barrier. So to give a quick example of this in my own life and why I think it works. So like I said, I run Catalyst XL, but before I ran Catalyst XL, I started a student organization at my school called Gator Venture Capital. And so what it was essentially was an organization to help students break into venture capital by potentially getting venture capital jobs. And so we would partner with VC firms, with venture capital firms, and then teams of students would pair up with those firms to support them in different ways. And so when you think through kind of how that got started, when I think through how that got started, it definitely 100% applies to this framework. So step 1, pick an interest. My interest was working in venture capital, was getting a job in venture capital, becoming a venture capitalist, etc. And so step 2, find out what people with that interest want. Jobs in venture capital, right? And all the things that lead up to that, which is like connections, knowledge of venture capital and how it works, actual experience doing it so that you could be attractive to people who are hiring in that space. And then the fourth, find ways to remove those barriers. Sometimes this step is as simple as just giving them those things that they want. Like maybe it's not that hard to give it to them, but there aren't enough people who are providing it. And so that was the case at the University of Florida where I was doing this, is that a lot of students had this interest, but there was no organization like the one that I wanted to start. So we started it, and we were able to give students those connections. We were able to give them experience. We were able to teach them about venture capital through sessions. But the thing that I want to highlight about all of this is that none of this was like this big scalable Steve Jobs idea, right? There wasn't even any money involved. It was just like, how do we solve this problem in a simple way right now? And honestly, like, it was a service. It wasn't like a tech startup or anything like that. It wasn't this super high growth scalable thing. But because we cared about it so much, we just kept pushing and pushing to make it better and better. And it sort of inspired / pivoted into what we do now with Catalyst XL, which is a business. And so that's why I have so much conviction in this framework and why I know it works. And I've seen other people replicate this in Catalyst. And so, and I probably should have got their permission to maybe like plug the things that they've started and talk about it in this video, but I didn't. But anyway, I've seen this work a bunch of times, and that is why I, like I said, have so much conviction in it. So that is really those are the main things I wanted to say. The last couple things, I kind of already touched on this, is what makes a good business idea. And I'm just going to boil this down to one very simple thing, because a lot of people are tempted to say like, oh, it needs to be a big market, it needs to be scalable. I think I already squashed that, right? It doesn't need to be scalable. If it can still be a business without being scalable. Restaurants aren't scalable. Coaching businesses aren't scalable. Local agencies of any kind aren't scalable. So it doesn't necessarily have to be scalable to be a good business idea, maybe to be a good startup idea, but not a good business idea. So what does make a good business idea, though, in my opinion, is one that you could actually do. So not one that can be done, not one that's possible. Yes, one that people want, but very, very importantly, one that you yourself, with your skills, your interests, your passion, your knowledge, what could you actually do? With your resources, your connections, like the list goes on. It's like, one of my favorite things that I've heard from Alex Hormozy, really big voice in business, is he always says, number one rule in entrepreneurship, you have to use what you have. And so this was such a powerful lesson for me to learn, because you realize, like, there's a lot of talk in entrepreneurship, especially when you get started, you're so excited, you talk about all these big plans, and then a lot of the plans don't happen. And you think, like, man, I just suck, like, why can't I make this stuff happen? And it turns out that maybe you don't have the cards right now to make those things happen. So it's really important when you're starting out to take inventory of yourself and what you have, and take a look at your cards and decide how to play them, because it's all you can do. And so just to reel that back into the main point, what makes a good business idea, first and foremost, is one that you could actually make work. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. This is just one minor idea in the realm of student entrepreneurship that I want to talk about, but I thought it was fitting to talk about this first, so I hope this was helpful. And feel free to leave a comment if I left any questions unanswered, but I'm going to be making more content about this type of stuff, like I said. So yeah, see you guys in the next one.